Okay, good evening. Hope you're all doing well. Today we're learning Maseches Zevachim, Daf Kuf Hey. Mirza Hashem will get to the end of the parak tonight. We're starting on Kuf Hey Amud Aleph, about 6-7 lines down. Says the Gemara, Boy Rabbi Elazar, Param Usirim Hanisrafim Shiatzu B'chazru Mahu. What is the halachic status of the people who carried out and then back in the Param Hanisrafim, that they were going to be burned outside? Once you go out, according to some shitas, you would be tamei, tumas begadim. So if you went out and came back in, what would be the din? We're on Kuf Hamid Aleph, 7 lines down. Mi'amrinan came in the nafke luhu itmeluhu. Once you go out, you become tamei, nothing doing. Odil makaven de hadur. Or no, maybe because now you've come back in, now you're not considered to be tamei tumas begadim. So Amar Rabbi Abba bar Mamel Tashma, I have an answer for you. And this was what we saw in the very top line of Kuf Daled Amud Beis Brisa. How did they carry out the Param Hanisrafim, Useirim Hanisrafim? Says the Gemara, how you sold no son b'motos, they were carried out on poles. If the people carrying the front side of the pole had gone out, but the people carrying the back side of the pole had not yet gone out, so it's the person depends on the threshold of where they are. Now, the isal kadaitach that kevan denafke lehu itmu hanach the ika gavoy litma. If you want to say that it's going to be based on whoever went out should become tamei, you're actually missing a factor here, which is the animal itself. It shouldn't be when the person goes out. The avoda is on the animal. So when the animal goes out, it should be out. So if the animal goes out, even the guy who has yet to leave should also be tamei. So therefore, that is what the Gemara suggests, that it can't be that he would still be tamei. That can't be the implication of the Gemara. Amar Rabina v'Tizbra, is that really logical? Haba'ina v'achar yavo lamachane. You have to first go out in order to become tamei, and then later come back into the machane, and you didn't even do that. V'leka. So you can't even say that that's the appropriate understanding of the brisa. So says the Gemara, Ela Rabbi Elazar, heichi ba'ila. What was the real question of Rabbi Elazar that we started with? Not like we thought, but rather could go into nikitila bibekulsi. Rashi here points out some complex ukimta where people were standing outside and they had hooks and they were grabbing onto the animal and pulling the animal. They were trying to drag the animal outside. They were outside. They were dragging the animal, which was currently inside, dragging it out. Rashi goes through the details there. That was actually his question. We don't have an answer to that question. Good. Says the Gemara Tanu Rabbanan, Parim, which was referring to Parim Hanisrafim, Upara, which is a reference to the Para Aduma, Usir Mishtaleach, which is the animal that was the Sir La Azazel, that was taken care of on Yom Kippur. So Hameshaleach, the one who sends it, Hasorfan, the one who burns the Paraduma, Bahamotzian, the one who takes out the Param Hanisrafim. All of these are Metamin Begadim. All of these people become Metame Begadim with the actions that they did. Veheinatzman, but the animals themselves, Ein Metamin Begadim. The animals themselves did not have the capacity to generate Tuma. A very interesting split. That the maisa that you're doing, let's say I'm burning the paraduma. If I burn the paraduma, I become tamei. But if I touch the paraduma, I don't become tamei. Very halachic in nature. So that was true of the animal itself. Aval, while it's true that the animal couldn't be metame begadim, aval metamen ochlenu mashkin divi Reb Meir. We did have a little bit of a dichotomy where we could see that the animal wasn't going to be metame begadim, but the animal was strong enough to be metame ochlenu mashkin divi Reb Meir. The Chachamim Omrim, hold on one second, I disagree. Para uparim, when it comes to the para aduma or the param hanisrafim, those are metamen ochlenu mashkin, but the sir mishtalech enu metame shehu chai. This is the distinction. The sir mishtalech, it's still alive because the avoda wasn't done yet, right? So therefore, it can't be that it becomes tameh because it's alive. Achai enu metame ochlenu mashkin. An animal that's alive can't make foods become tameh. So now we have to analyze this brisa. It's a unique shita of Reb Meir and a unique shita of the Chachamim. It says the Gemara halfway down. Bishlam the Reb Meir, I understand the shita of Reb Meir. Reb Meir was of the opinion that these animals of the Param Hanisrafim, the Para Adum Sir Mishtaleach, they could be metame begadim, but they themselves were not tameh. But these animals could make foods, ochlin umashkin tameh. So says the Gemara, I understand Reb Meir kedatana debei Rabbi Shmuel. Within the framework of Rabbi Shmuel, I understand Reb Meir. Why? So Tana debate Rabbi Shmuel that al kol zera zerua asher yizareya, I think is the rest of the pasuk over there, that pasuk is talking about a sheretz that touches seeds. Mazraim she'ein sofan litame tuma chamura. These seeds are never going to become tuma chamura, but tzrichin hechsher, and they need a liquid in order for tuma to transfer. Af kol she'ein sofan litame tuma chamura tzrichin hechsher. Everything that isn't on its own, just by its own evolution, if it's not going to become a tuma chamura, then it needs a liquid. What's the exception? Yatzasa nevelas of tahor shesofa litame tuma chamura. The of tahor, the second you swallow an of tahor by the beis habliya, you're going to eat that food. It's going to become a tuma chamura. Ve'ein tzricha hechsher. So this fits nicely with the shita of Reb Meir. Elo l'Rabbanan, we don't understand how he fits with Tana Devei Rabbi Shmuel. I islahu de Tana Devei Rabbi Shmuel. If you agree, the Chachamim, if you agree with Tana Devei Rabbi Shmuel, then afilu se'er mishtaleach. Then according to what you're saying, the se'er mishtaleach should also be metame. And if you do hold of Tana Devei Rabbi Shmuel, his principle, so then even the para and parim, where did you get that from that they, let's see, just look back at the Chachamim, where did you get that from that they should become, that they are animals that are metamin, ochlin umashkin? Says the Gemara, here's the answer to that question, 12 lines from the bottom. Kiyasa Rav Dimi, Amar, Rav Dimi said, Amri b'ma'arabba, tzrichin hechsher tuma mimakom acher. We're talking about, let's say, the tuma of the para and the parim, it's automatic. But the asir mishtaleach would need to die first. The cases are basically not different. The words don't reflect these words, but that's what the Mefarshim explain over here. And here is the next question. Boy Rebbe Lazar, parim han usirim hanisrafim, mao sheyitamu ochlin umashkim bifnim kibachutz. Would we say that while the parim hanisrafim and the seirim hanisrafim are inside, would they be metame foods? Do we say mechusar yotzia ki mechusar ma'asadami, that no, they are not going to be metame anything because they are not tame yet? Or do we say no, olo, or we know that they're going out shortly, and then that would be metame? So says the Gemara, Basar Debai Hadar Pashta. We have an answer to this question about whether or not the parim hanisrafim would be metame foods inside the azara. The Gemara says mechusar yotzia ki mechusar ma'asadami, and therefore it would not be metame anything. Next question, 7 lines from the bottom. Rabbi Abba bar Shmuel mi Reb Chia bar Abba nevelas of tahor le Reb Meir. If we have the nevela, we have the carcass of an of tahor according to Reb Meir. Reb Meir was of the opinion that sofu litama tuma chamura, that we know that by a bird that if you eat it, it's going to make you tame. Mao sheyatame b'kezayis. Now that we already have a chiddush of the sheet of Rav Meir, would we also change the volume of food you need to eat to be metame? Normally, we assume you need a kibetza to be metame in a beis habliya. But but it would require a chiddush to get there. So the Gemara wants to know, because Rav Meir is already a mechudishtik opinion, would we say the same about the shiur of kizayis, that perhaps a kizayis is metame, even though normally a kibetza is metame? So the Gemara says, demachta la'ara lo tibaylach. While the bird is on the ground, there's no question over there, because he's missing too much to say that you would have a chiddush of kizayis, you'd need a kibetza. The nakid bepuma lo tibaylach. We also don't need a pasha. You'd be tamei if you had it in your mouth. That's not called mechusar ma'isar. You're about to swallow the food. Ki tibaylach the nakil abiyada. We're talking about where you're holding the nevelas of tahor in your hands. Do we say mechusar kreva ki mechusar ma'asadami? Olo. Do we say that the action you're holding the bird in your hand? Okay, if you're not holding it, that's not sofuli tame. If it's in your mouth, that's sofuli tame. What if it's in your hand? So the Gemara says, is it that? Is it kimchusar ma'asadami? Oh, no. Now we turn to the top of Kuf Hamid Beis. The Gemara says that it should say Amar Le at the top, where that little aleph is, if you have that. Mechusar kreva lav kimchusar ma'asadami. When something is lacking kurva, that's not mechusar. That's not a mechusar ma'isa. In other words, if it's in your hand, it's sofuli tame. It's sofuli tame to mechamura. Eisvei, the Gemara says, wait 1 second. We have a brisa that if you were with us the last cycle, we learned about a Maseches Nida. Shlosha asar dvarim. 13 things were said. Ne'amru b'nevelas of tahor. They were said about the corpse, the carcass of an oaf that was tahor. V'zeh echad man. Here's one. Tzricha machshava ve'ein tzricha hechsher. What does tzricha machshava mean? Rashi says on the second line on the top of Kuf Hamid Beis, Rashi says tzricha machshava litzdaref pachos mikazais mimena. You need kavana to be mitzdaref two portions that are less than a kizayis lahashlim pachos mikibetza. That in order to get to that right shiur. So back in the Gemara, one is that you need machshava for tziruf, and the second is ve'ein tzricha hechsher. The second is that you don't need to have any liquids to make them tummy. What do we see? Black on white. We wanted to know if maybe within the framework of Rav Meir we could have had a chiddush that it could have been mitame bebeis habliya because here we see black on white, not like that. My love, Rav Meir. And therefore we have an answer to our question that Rav Meir would say no. We don't allow for tuma b'kazais. If you only ate a kazais, you ate nevela to us, but you're not tama yet because the tuma of tumas beis habliya is only a kibetza. So maybe that's Rav Meir. The Gemara says, no, Rabbanan, he really maybe this brisa from Maseches Nida is like the sheet of the Rabbanan and not Rav Meir. The Gemara says it's the Rabbanan. That's a little schwer because on Kuf Hamid base 6-7 lines down, Baktani Reisha Tzricha Machshava. The Reisha says Tzricha Machshava ve'ein Tzricha Hechsher Uman Shamas Leila Haisvara. That's Rav Meir. And then in the Reisha Rav Meir, Seifanami Rav Meir. We should stay consistent. The Gemara says, Midi Irya, why would you say that? How many times in Shas have we had this kind of question? Ha Kida Isa, Baha Kida Isa. We don't need them to be perfectly matchy. So we're good. The Gemara says, but wait, I have another question for you. Diktani Seifa, later, this is the second Seifa, meaning he's still further on in the Brisa, Maseches Nida, Shchitasa umalikasa metaheres trefasa mitumasa, that if you do shchita, or if it's a bird and you do malika, it removes the trefa status and it's tuma. Man shamas lehaisvar, that's Rav Meir. So now we have Reisha v'Sefer Rav Meir, umatziyasa rabbanon. You want to tell me the Reisha and the Sefer are different people, no problem. But we're going to have Rav Meir on the outer parts. It's like an Oreo. You got the two outsides are the same and the inside is different. That can't be. Says the Gemara in Reisha v'Sefer Rav Meir Mitziyas Rabban. Now we only do this when we are compelled to. Obviously, if the Gemara is easy to be understood without saying Reisha v'Sefer or Reisha v'Sefer u'Mitziyasa, that it would be different authors. We always try to have things to be a little bit more smooth. But here we had no other way to learn it. We had no other way to learn it. All right, let's talk about some Tuma V'Tar about Rishon and Sheni. We know that an Avatuma, Avi Avosa Tuma is the highest, then there's Avatuma, then there's Rishon and Sheni for some foods, Shlishi for some foods, even Revi, very, very sensitive types of foods, by Truma, by Kochim. So says the Gemara, a third of the way down in Kuf Hamid Aleph, Kuf Hamid Beis, excuse me. Amar le Rav Hamnuna le Reb Zera, Lo tesi v'karach, don't sit on your feet, ad da'amr sliha milsa. In other words, tell me this Torah while you're standing here, please don't go anywhere. Nevelas ovtar le Rab Meir, the carcass of an animal that's Torah according to Rab Meir. Monin la rishon v'sheni or ein monin rishon v'sheni. Does it have enough power to generate rishon and sheni or not? Amar le kol hechad dematame adam b'maga monin bo rishon v'sheni. Wherever we have a person that is going to be mitame, wherever we have something that's going to be mitame a person, then we have rishon and sheni. That's an avatuma, tuma sheret, whatever the case may be. Kol hechad de ein mitame adam b'maga, like our case. Our case is not strong enough. The case of Nevelas Ovtar, that doesn't make a person tameh by touching it. That's only by eating a beis habliya, only by eating a kibetza habliya. So therefore, you would not you wouldn't have Rishon and Sheni Tuma status with the Nevelas Ovtar. V'aminei Reb Zer Reb Ami Bar Chiya, Amri Lamer Reb Avin Rav Kahana. Hadetanya Chiburi Ochlan Al Yedei Mashkin. Let's say there are two pieces of meat that we want to be mitzdarif. They're in the same pot with a liquid medium, but they themselves are not touching. Chibur latuma kala, ve'ein chibur latuma chamura. This is good for tuma kala, which means this is just code word for saying other foods will become tameh. But there is no tuma chamura where we're talking about the type of tuma that would be for adam v'kelim. It could only be matame foods. In those cases, mona barisham v'sheni, o ein mona barisham v'sheni. So here we have a little bit of a knech, because it has the capacity to do tuma chamura. The Gemara says same answer as before. Amar le, and we're more than halfway down on Kuf Hamid Beis. Kol echad matame adam. If the original food can be matame a person, which is only talking about an av hatuma, then monim barishon v'sheni. Then that food can then the power. It's just such a powerful tuma. It can generate rishon and sheni for tuma. But ein metam and adam. If they're not able to, then ein monin barishon v'sheni. It's a good general rule in Shas that we don't have Rishon and Sheni unless the original Tuma was strong enough to be Mitame, a person, which can only happen, generally speaking, with an Av HaTuma. So we said Yatsu Elu ve'elu. We were talking about the din that we learned in our Mishnah on the previous blot about the people who carried out the animal on the poles. So we said that if they're carrying them out, that if the first one goes out, then that's one din, and then the people in the back are another din. And then on the top of Kuf Daled Amud Beis, that Mishnah ended, and 4 lines down from the top of Kuf Daled Amud Beis, it says Yatsu, if they both go out, Elu ve'elu matamin begadim. That's what the Gemara says. Ask the Gemara where we are, 2/3 of the way down on Kuf Hey Amud Beis. Minanimili, how do we know this? The Tana Rabbana. Lehalan, over there, which was talking about Parhel, we wouldn't know this, but that's where we have Rishonim, by Parhelim Davar Shal Tzibor and Parkoin Mashiach. Lehalan hu Omer Chutz Legimel Machanos. That those animals are tended to outside of the 3 machanos. They're outside of any place of sanctity. The Khan, in our case, where we're talking about the Par B'Sar Shel Kippurim, that is Lemachane Achas. That's only outside of the Machane Kahuna. That's the holiest part. Lomar Lach, what does that teach us? Kevan Shiatza Chutz Lemachane Achas Matame Begadim. That the second you leave that first space, you're going to be Matame Tumas Begadim. I Vehi Gufa Minalan. That case of Parhalam Davar Shal Tzibur, that where you leave the Chutz Lemachane Achas outside of the Machane Kahuna, that you're going to become Tame Tumas Begadim. Where do we know that? From the Tana Rabbanan. The pasuk says in Vayikra Perek Dal, V'hotzi es kol ha'paral michutz l'machane. And what does it say mean over there? That's chutz l'gimel machanos. To omer chutz l'gimel machanos. You want to make a drasha that it's outside of the 3, all the way outside. Oeinu ela machane achas. So the Gemara says maybe it's only outside of 1 when we talk about the par helam davar shel tzibor or the par kohen mashiach. This says the Gemara kshu omer b'par ha'eda, when we're talking about the par ha'eda, which is another reference of par helam davar shel tzibor, it says michutz lamachane she'ein tzarich lomar. That's extra to say michutz lamachane. We already knew that. Where did we know that it had to be michutz lamachane? Hari kvar ne'emar kasher saraf es ha'par harishon liten lamachane shnia. We had a second reference to being outside. Every time it says outside, it's telling you another layer of outside. This is the second time. And we had another reference of michutz lamachane in Vayikra Perek Vav. There we didn't need that. So we see all the Marim Mekomos, all the michutz lamachanes, they all add up to say that it has to be outside of all 3 and you become Tam. The Reb Shimon, according to Reb Shimon, what does he hold? What does he do with that? So it says the Gemara, Reb Shimon says we need the language of michutz lamachane from, this is a different pasuk of Vayikra Tes Zayin, talking about Yom Kippurim. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Eliezer Omer Nemar Kan Chutz Lamachane V'Nemar Alhan Chutz Lamachane Ma'alahalan Chutz Legimel Machanos Afkan Chutz Legimel Machanos. Just like by the Par B'Shel Shema Kippurim, it's outside of all 3. So too by Par Aduma, it's outside of all 3. Ma'alahalan Mizracha Shel Yerushalayim, and just like by the Par Aduma is to the east of Yerushalayim, which we learned about extensively in some Masechta. I can't remember where it was. Afkan over here by the Par B'Sar Shel Kippurim, that too is going to be Lemizracha Shel Yerushalayim. Ayala L'Rabbanan, turning to the top of Vavam and Aleph and heading to the end of the parak. Ela L'Rabbanan, according to the Shita of the Rabbanan, Heicha Sarif Lehu, because they don't have the hekesh of that we just said Malahalan Afkan. So where do they know to burn the Paraduma? So that's what Rashi says. Heicha Sarflu Le'eze Ruach Shal Yerushalayim. Which direction were they in? We had the comparison between Par B'Sar Shema Kippurim to Paraduma, but they don't have that, because remember that they don't have the same drush of Reb Shimon. So the Gemara says, "Kedetanya Heicha Nisrafin Letzfon Yerushalayim Chutz L'Shalosh Machnos Machlokas," as to where we tend to these korbanos. Are they done to the east or are they done to the north? This is something that we probably learned earlier. I don't distinctly remember, but it's a very unique shita. That's what Rashi says. Rashi says, "Letzvona shel Yerushalayim." He gives a little bit of the lamdus. This is what we learned about earlier in the Maseches. Shekol ma'asechatas b'tzafons. We said in the parak of Ezim Mekom, I think that was the 4th parak, that everything that's where the chatas is done in the north. Huh? Because that was the 3rd parak. Which one was it? I want to call you out on it. Oh, you can call me out on it. I want to make sure I'm right. It's the 8th. Oh, it's the 5th. I was wrong. Oh, you made me check. So for the people who are going to listen to this, they'll know that I was wrong. Is it the 5th? Where is it? Yeah, it's the 5th pass. Okay, thanks for caring. Says the Gemara, Yossi Aglili Omer, Beis Hadeshen Nisrafin. No, they're somewhere else, and we already spoke about where the Beis Hadeshen was. There were three Batei Deshen. One was the classic one was by Bira, and one was outside of Michutz Lamachem. Amar Rava, Man Tana de Palagled Rabbi Yossi. There is someone who disagrees with Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Videtanya al shefech hadeshen yisarev sheyehei sham deshen, that there has to be some ash there before you are going to burn this animal, the animal by the paraduma. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, mekoma meshupach. No, I disagree. Al shefech hadeshen doesn't mean that there has to be deshen there. It means that it has to be sloped. Meshupach, it has to be on a slope. It could just be that that's what they're arguing about whether or not the place where they do the paraduma has to be sloped as opposed to a plateau. Last little section before the end of the parak, and then we'll stop for tonight. The Gemara says that when a person burns the paraduma, that's when they become matame begadim. Below hamate says saor matame begadim, not the guy who lights the match. It's the one who actually burns the paraduma. Below hamisader es ha'amaroch matame begadim. By Hilchos Shabbos, we say echad maybe esa eisim, echad maybe esa, or everybody's chai. Here we don't say that. The tumas begadim is only the person who burnt the animal. Ve'ezu asorev, who is the one who's considered to be the sorev. Hamisayeh b'shas reifa. You're moving around the animal in the fire. You're moving around the wood for the sake of burning the animal. All those people would become tamei. Yachol af mishenasu efer metamin begadim. What if we're past the point of burning and now we only have just ash? So says the Gemara, Tamalomar osam metamin begadim, mishenasu efer and metamin begadim. Drasha. That if you get in there and you start after the animal's already down to, it's so hot, it's like a crematorium, it turns it to ash, then you don't become tamei begadim if you take care of the animal at that point. Reb Shimon Omer, similar drasha, osa metamid begadim, nitach habasar ein metamid begadim. But if the animal's already burnt, so then it's not metamid begadim. Says the Gemara, those two answers seem extremely similar. The first answer said osa metamid begadim, but afer is not. The second second answer was osa metamid begadim and nitach habasar ein metamid. My beinayu, Amar Rava, ika beinayu deshavyuha charucha. That if it were to have been very burnt. There's a difference between being burnt and being ash. According to the first answer, ash is going to be no tuma because it's too far, but if it's very burnt, you would be tamei. According to the second answer, even if it's very burnt, you're not. So there is a difference between those two stages. Hadran alach tful yom baruch Hashem. We finished the 12th parak of Maseches Zevachim. We should come back to this daf in 7.5 years. Wishing you all a beautiful night.